Can you tell what it is?
Tobor the 8th Man wasn't just a forgotten 60s cartoon. It was a bold experiment in cyber-noir animation that flirted with censorship, chaos, identity, and death. Beneath its masked android hero and jazzy soundtrack lies a production story filled with tragedy, studio meddling, and post-war trauma. Here are the 15 weirdest facts about Tobor the 8th Man, and one final secret so strange it changes how you see the whole series. Fact number 15. The series was originally too dark for American TV. What audiences didn't know is that the original Japanese version of 8th Man was far grimmer than what aired in the United States. The show dealt with death addiction and moral ambiguity in ways that pushed boundaries for 1960s animation. In Japan, 8th Man was created by Kazumasa Hirai and artist Jiro Kuwata as a crime noir series about a murdered detective resurrected as a cyborg. He chain-smoked energy cigarettes to function and grappled with memories of his human past. When syndicated in the U.S. as Tobor the 8th Man in 1965, most of these themes were censored or softened. Energy cigarettes were stripped of meaning. The gritty mood was undercut with simplified dialogue. But even with edits, the show kept a surreal undercurrent of death and identity crisis that made it feel like nothing else on kids' TV. It wasn't just about justice, it was about trauma in a synthetic body. That tone got under the skin and stayed. Fact number 14. His name spelled backwards was a clue to the real theme. Tobor isn't just a cool robot name, it's robot spelled backwards. And that wasn't a gimmick. It was a metaphor baked into the series' DNA. The reversal signals the deeper theme. This isn't a story about a machine becoming human. It's about a human losing his identity to become a machine. The protagonist was once Detective Yokota, murdered on duty, then rebuilt with synthetic parts and a new artificial name. His humanity is always one step behind his programming. This theme of reversed identity runs through the episodes. Tobor hides his true self under a trench coat and fedora. He works with humans but doesn't fully belong. Even his voice, flat, calm, emotionless, is a ghostly echo of the man he once was. In a decade when superheroes were bold and colorful, Tobor was cold and haunted. The backward name isn't just clever, it's the show's entire message wrapped in 4 letters. Fact number 13. The voice actor died in a real-life tragedy. Peter Fernandez was the voice of Tobor and a legend in dubbing. But what most fans don't realize is that his co-star, Jack Curtis, who voiced the villain Dr. Spectra, met a tragic and mysterious end. Jack Curtis died suddenly in 1970 from a rare cancer shortly after the show's syndication ended. The exact cause was never fully disclosed. Some fans speculated that working conditions in the dubbing studios, often cramped with poor ventilation and long recording sessions, contributed to declining health among voice actors in that era. His death cast a shadow over the already fading series. Without Curtis's vocal menace, the character of Dr. Spectra lost its bite. His passing became one of several real-life tragedies that haunted the short-lived run of Tobor the 8th Man. Behind the robotic masks and jazzy title cards, real humans paid a price. Fact number 12. The animation was recycled from a failed spy series. What viewers thought was original animation was often leftover or repurposed material. In fact, the studio behind Tobor the 8th Man reused character models and action loops from a scrapped espionage-themed show developed months earlier. Telecartoon Japan, the animation studio, had originally pitched a sci-fi cartoon in the style of James Bond, but struggled with budget and pacing. When that show failed to launch, the team repurposed many of the backgrounds and character sketches into the darker cybernetic tale that became 8th Man. That's why many episodes feature backgrounds that look oddly out of place. Neon-lit labs next to suburban neighborhoods or Cold War bunkers behind glass towers. It was a patchwork world built from the remnants of other ideas. But somehow it worked. The visual dissonance made the world feel surreal and alien, just like Tobor himself. Fact number 11. The English dub had to be done in secret. By 1965, anime was still a dirty word in American animation circles. U.S. studios saw Japanese imports as threats or oddities. So when Tobor the 8th Man was licensed for American syndication, the dubbing was done quickly and quietly, often after hours in rented studios. Peter Fernandez and his small team, including Corinne Orr, voiced multiple characters and had almost no time to rewrite or polish the script. They worked from poor translations, re-recorded scenes repeatedly, and edited tape reels by hand. Even the show's credits were vague. Some episodes listed pseudonyms or left voice actors uncredited. At the time, this was partly due to union tensions and partly due to embarrassment. Studios feared backlash for using foreign cartoons on American airwaves. But this underground process birthed a strange rhythm and tone that made Tobor stand out. The dub didn't sound like anything else, because it wasn't made like anything else. Fact number 10. He smoked energy cigarettes that were later censored. In the original Japanese version of 8th Man, the cyborg hero smoked mysterious energy cigarettes to recharge his body. These weren't symbolic. They were plot-critical. Without them, Tobor couldn't function. It was a grim metaphor for dependency, an artificial man kept alive by chemical addiction. But when Tobor the 8th Man came to the U.S. in 1965, this caused panic. Cigarette smoking, especially by a supposed hero, was a red flag for American censors. The solution? Rewrite the context and reanimate scenes to tone down or erase the habit. In some dubs, the word energy was used vaguely. In others, the animation simply cut around it. But in reality, Tobor was a nicotine-fueled android, and that made him far more flawed and vulnerable than other clean-cut heroes of the era. Not a role model, but a relic of a darker sci-fi worldview. Go ahead and like and subscribe, because even the censors couldn't extinguish the eerie brilliance of this forgotten robot noir. Fact number 9. The show was nearly blacklisted in American syndication. When the U.S. syndication team prepared Tobor the 8th Man for broadcast, they ran into unexpected resistance from several local TV stations. Some flagged the show as too violent or too foreign. Others refused to air it altogether. The scenes that caused the most concern? Gun violence, death without resurrection, and Tobor's stoic response to murder. In one early episode, Tobor calmly vaporizes a group of criminals with no remorse. It wasn't slapstick. It was cold, brutal justice. This tone clashed with the bright optimism of American animation. Stations in the South and Midwest declined the series. Only select urban markets with looser standards picked it up, often airing it late at night or alongside weirder fare like Ultraman or Speed Racer. The result? Tobor became an underground oddity, rarely seen, even more rarely understood, but for those who caught it, unforgettable. Fact number 8. One episode was so disturbing, it disappeared. There's one episode of Tobor the 8th Man that many fans have never seen, and for good reason. Titled The Terror of Spectra X, it originally aired in Japan with a disturbing plot involving a mutated child, cybernetic organ harvesting, and brain control experiments gone wrong. When dubbed into English, the story was trimmed and re-edited, but even then it left networks uneasy. The antagonist, a childlike figure with half his face robotic, was too grotesque for Saturday morning TV. The few stations that aired it reportedly received parent complaints. One newspaper in Boston even published a letter titled, "Why is this on after school?" In response, syndicators quietly pulled the episode from the regular package. Today, only degraded fan VHS copies and a few off-air reels preserve it. It's a relic of when Tobor crossed a line, no cartoon, before it dared approach. Fact number 7. The animation budget was lower than most ads. While Tobor the 8th Man looked bold with its noir style and futuristic action, the budget behind it was shockingly small. In 1963, the Japanese production had less money than most cereal commercials airing alongside it in the US. The result? Corners were cut at every turn. Walk cycles were reused across episodes. Lip flaps didn't match. Action scenes were built around static poses with dramatic pans. Yet, despite this, the mood stayed intact. Director Haruyuki Kawajima leaned into minimalism. He used shadows, high-contrast frames, and abrupt music cues to elevate scenes far beyond their budget. Some moments, like Tobor walking into a hail of bullets with dead eyes, feel cinematic, not cheap. It wasn't sleek, it was stark. The lack of polish became its own aesthetic. What the show lacked in frames, it made up for in intensity. Not limited, just focused. Fact number 6. Tobor was a pioneer in the cyborg anti-hero archetype. Before RoboCop, before Ghost in the Shell, before even the $6 Million Man, there was Tobor the 8th Man. The series laid the groundwork for the tormented cyborg anti-hero long before the archetype was mainstream. Tobor wasn't a happy robot. He didn't celebrate his strength. He mourned his lost humanity. His powers were gifts with heavy costs. He could run at jet speed and change his face, but he could never truly live again. This quiet sorrow echoes in later sci-fi icons. RoboCop's Alex Murphy walks Tobor's path almost note for note. The internal conflict between man and machine. The memory gaps, the silent pain. 8 Man was the blueprint, and it aired decades earlier. Critics ignored it at the time, but creators remembered. The influence is undeniable. Tobor didn't just punch crime. He wrote the first lines of a genre's emotional code. Fact number 5. The American scripts were written without seeing the episodes. In one of the strangest production decisions of the era, the American scripts for Tobor the 8th Man were often written before the dubbing team had access to the full animation reels. This backwards workflow wasn't just inefficient, it was chaos. Peter Fernandez and his team would sometimes receive incomplete footage, silent reels, or only loose scene descriptions translated from Japanese. Faced with gaps in the action and nonsensical transitions, they were forced to invent dialogue that might match the on-screen movement once the animation finally arrived. In some cases, entire subplots were made up on the fly. What was a tragic meditation on post-human identity in the original became a rapid-fire quip session in the dub. Scenes with emotional weight were replaced with simplified action narration. The result? Episodes that sometimes feel like a dream. Voices drifting over mismatched visuals and mysterious pauses. Not broken. Just oddly hypnotic. Fact number 4. The original toys were so rare. They became mythical. Unlike Speed Racer or Gigantor, Tobor the 8th Man never got a full American toy line. But in Japan, there were a handful of early action figures and tin toys released in 1964. And today, they are holy grails for collectors. Produced by companies like Bullmark and Marusan, these toys featured stiff metal arms, snap-on visors, and even glowing eye mechanisms. But most were manufactured in extremely limited numbers and sold only for a few months. The most legendary piece? A foot-tall Energy Tobor figure with a built-in cigarette lighter meant to simulate his recharge function. Only a few hundred were made, and after safety complaints, most were pulled from shelves. By the 1980s, these rare figures were fetching thousands at auction. Today, they are museum pieces, part of exhibitions on anime history. The toys faded like the series, but what remains is radioactive nostalgia in metallic form. Fact number 3. The show was almost revived by DC Comics. In the early 1980s, American comic publishers were desperately hunting for properties to tap into the growing anime craze. One surprising candidate? Tobor the 8th Man. DC Comics, fresh off their experiment with Robotech and Godzilla, began negotiations to license Tobor and relaunch him in comic form, this time with a grittier tone, updated look, and Cold War espionage themes. Concept art was created, scripts were drafted. One pitch even had Tobor battling a Soviet cyborg in Berlin. But internal DC politics, licensing confusion, and legal disputes over who owned the rights to 8-Man in the US caused the deal to collapse. Nothing was published. But the drafts exist in collector circles. And they reveal what could have been a major revival. Decades before cyberpunk became cool, the world wasn't ready for a resurrected Tobor. But he almost returned. Almost. Fact number 2. The composer claimed the theme was rejected jazz. One of the catchiest elements of Tobor the 8th Man is its theme music, that jazzy, horn-driven tune that straddles cool and eerie. But what few fans know is that the composer, Kei Ichikawa, later claimed the theme was a rejected jazz piece from a music library, not originally written for the show. In an obscure radio interview in the 1970s, Ichikawa revealed that the production company was so low on budget that they asked him to rework an unused cue from a failed crime drama score. He polished it, added a few futuristic flares, and delivered it under a tight deadline. To everyone's surprise, it clicked. The music gave Tobor a swagger it wouldn't otherwise have. Part detective noir, part space-age strut. It made the android hero feel mythic. Not bad for a track pulled from the reject bin. It's now one of the most recognizable early anime themes of all time. Fact number 1. Tobor's ending was changed because the original was too depressing. In the final Japanese episodes of 8-Man, the story takes a dark philosophical turn. Tobor begins to question his role in society. He fights enemies who see him as a machine. He loses allies. He walks into the horizon, alone and disconnected from humanity. But when the American version aired, this ending was heavily edited. Scenes were cut, dialogue was altered. Tobor's existential doubts were rewritten as heroic declarations. The melancholy finale became an upbeat, mission accomplished tone. Why? American syndicators feared children wouldn't understand or would be left disturbed. One memo from a distributor even warned that the robot cannot appear depressed. But that's what 8th Man was always about, the tension between identity and programming. By sanding off the edge, the US version missed the point. Still, traces of that sorrow remain. In every quiet stare, in every final punch. It wasn't just about victory, it was about what it cost. Bonus fact: Tobor's voice was recycled into early GPS technology. This is the fact almost no one knows. In the early 90s, a Japanese tech startup experimenting with prototype vehicle navigation systems was looking for a calm but authoritative voice to guide users. An engineer, who happened to be a vintage anime collector, submitted cleaned-up audio files of Tobor's Japanese voice actor, Hisashi Katsuta, from old episodes. To their surprise, the test group responded positively. The system felt futuristic and trustworthy. For a short time, experimental GPS units in Tokyo taxicabs used remixed lines from 8th Man as voice prompts. Turn left, route acquired, danger ahead. The lines weren't recorded for GPS. They were carefully edited from the show itself. Eventually, the company adopted new voice tech. But for a brief window, a forgotten robot from 1963 was guiding real drivers through real streets. Not just a cartoon, a digital ghost in the machine.